Hello there, welcome to Bryan Lomax Movie Talk and my review for Goldeneye. Yes, we're getting back into Bond. If you haven't seen already, I have done my rankings for both the Connery and the Roger Moore eras, and just to bring you up to speed for, well, this. It's been a long time since I've done proper reviews for the Bond films. I did intend to go all the way through them. For whatever reason, got sidetracked and never went back to them. So I'm doing it now in the run-up to the new Bond film. I'm going through the Pierce Brosnan films, and then I'm going to do the Daniel Craig films. And it starts here with Goldeneye, a revamp essentially for the Bond franchise. It had pretty much been dead for 6 years. The last film before this was License to Kill, a film that I actually like quite a lot when you look at Bond films. I think it's a rather underrated Bond film. But it didn't do too well with regards to the fans and box office and things like that. And yeah, they needed a rethink, it seemed. Personally, I didn't think so, but yeah, apparently it was a bit too much, a bit too full on for a Bond film at the time it came out, which is quite daft when you look at the Daniel Craig films these days. It was just ahead of its time within the realm of Bond. But we get Martin Campbell coming on board as director, and basically having, the weight of the Bond franchise on his shoulders. And the question is, does he deliver? Well, I'll spare you any suspense. Yeah, he does. This is one of the best Bond films, it must be said. I'll say that right up front. It does have its issues. It does have some problems. It's not a perfect film. But it is essentially the film that made me a Bond fan. Now, I'm not a die-hard Bond fan. There are real hardcore Bond fans out there who, will even watch Moonraker every year. That ain't going to be me, I can tell you that much. But this is the film that kind of said, you know what, there's more to this Bond malarkey than I've given it credit for. And I kind of tapped into Bond for a period because of this film. So yeah, the introduction, we have a typical kind of Bond setup where you have a big stunt and a big action set piece that kind of kicks the story forward. The introduction is kind of within itself is a film of two halves, which is that it opens really strong with an incredible stunt in which this guy obviously Bond jumps from a dam. It's clearly not Pierce Brosnan, it's a stuntman, but they block it really well so that it effectively looks like Brosnan. But yeah, incredible stunt. Some nice introduction work for Brosnan's Bond. We get some what will be kind of customary for him, his one-liners, just either before or after taking someone out. And we're introduced to the character of 006, played by Sean Bean, who obviously is the main villain of this film. Something I kind of like about this. I like that, for the first time in a Bond film, that the main villain is another 00. It's basically Bond's mirror image, 00 versus 00. They both have the same skill set. They're basically a perfect match for each other. So obviously that would be followed up in Skyfall later on. But yeah, here was the first kind of time that we had it, and I like it. I like the villain. I think it's a strong villain. I think the villains across the board are pretty strong, actually. We'll get to the other few villains in a bit. But the rest of the intro, goes a little bit too out there. So there's a bit where a plane... So that just the closing section of this intro, a plane falls off a cliff. Bond jumps off the cliff, dives down to the plane, gets inside it, starts it up, and then flies off with it. And I'm just like, no. It didn't work for me in 1995 when I first saw it. It's never worked for me since, and it didn't for this viewing either. It's just, we see ridiculous things in Bond all the time, but this really defies the laws of physics, and it's just a bit stupid. It kind of ruins the work that is done in the introduction prior to that, to be honest. But for the most part, it does a good job of introducing us to Brosnan's Bond. From there, of course, we get the obligatory title sequence in which we have kind of weird designs going on with naked women kind of dancing in the background. Like I say, customary, we expect it. And it gives us the title song, which is by Tina Turner. I like this title song. I think it's one of the better Bond themes. Tina Turner's got a real powerful voice, and she sells it. She sells it's kind of got that Shirley Bassey vibe about it. Not quite on that level. Obviously, Tina Turner is a a talented singer in her own right. Has done her own stuff. But yeah, I think she's a good match for a Bond theme, and it works. After that, we get into the main story, which sees Bond going up against Alec Trevelyan, played by Sean Bean, obviously, who has stolen a stealth jet. He's stolen the stealth jet so that he can use it to break into a particular site and use an EMP without it taking the jet out, because EMPs don't work on this helicopter that they've stolen. And they're going to steal the Goldeneye, which is obviously the title of the film, which is a satellite which will allow Trevelyan to essentially wipe all records. He'll be able to hack into government computers and get rid of bank records, social security numbers, things like that, everything basically, and put us back to ground zero, and steal a load of money in the process. Helping him along the way is his right-hand woman, Xenia Onatopp, played brilliantly by Famke Janssen. One of her better roles, I think. She obviously her first role, I believe. I could be mistaken on that, but I certainly don't remember seeing her in anything before this. She was a bit of a newbie, but she just, she goes for it. She kind of hams it up in many respects, but she knows exactly what this character is, and she plays it to the hilt. With a name like Onatopp, there's only so many places you can go with this character, but she goes there, and she goes there quite happily. Some of the scenes are quite ridiculous when she's kind of shooting a room full of people and seems to be getting off on it. It's typically Bond villainesque, and this double team of Trevelyan and Onatopp, two of my favourite kind of Bond villains. You usually get the main villain and the henchman, and one of the two will be stronger than the other, and the other one will be a bit weak. These two are both really strong villains, and I like them. So when they're on screen, I'm having fun. One villain that I'm not having fun with when watching this film is Boris Kreschenko, played by Alan Cumming. This guy is annoying as hell. This is a computer analyst who basically double crosses all the people he works with to go and work with Trevelyan, and he's just annoyed, and he has this trait of kind of messing with a pen, which will come into it towards the end of the film. It's kind of set up for an exploding pen, which Bond uses in a moment that's actually quite nicely played. It's tense for a Bond film, I don't know if it's coming or just the character or the way it's directed or whatever, but it's a bit too much. There is a level of seriousness to this film, and I know I've just talked about planes falling off cliffs and Bond getting in and all this, and the Xenia Onatopps of the world, but there is still like a dark edge to this film, which kind of carries over from where we left off with Timothy Dalton. And I just feel like this character, Kreschenko, is just too goofy, too over the top annoying, and childish, really childish. I think he oversells it. I think Cumming oversells it, and I've never been a particularly big fan of Cumming as an actor. No, nothing against him as a person. I don't know him, so I can't judge, but just his performances to me always seem very flamboyant and theatre-esque. I feel like he comes from a background of theatre. It's one of the problems I have with people like David Tennant, where they're great theatre actors, but for me, they're just too loud when they're on screen, when you need to dial it down a bit, and just be a bit quieter. Finally, we got Gottfried John as General Grigorovich. He's like, a Russian general that is kind of working with Trevelyan. He's also quite an entertaining villain, and that's mostly down to John as an actor, to be honest. There's a lot of times in this film, if you're just paying attention to what he's doing on screen, his reactions to things on his face, it actually makes me chuckle quite a lot. I think he brings a lot to this role. On paper, there's probably not a lot there, but he sells it. He's just, you may not have paid attention, I don't know. He is one of those characters on paper who's just, a side villain, but next time you watch it, just pay attention to what he's doing. Whenever there's a scene happening and he's on it, just look at what he's doing with his facial expressions and the way he's reacting to everyone. I like what he brings to it, and it kind of overall, again, it just strengthens that roster of villains that we have for this film. Cummings' villain aside, Boris, obviously. New additions for this iteration of Bond are, of course, Judi Dench as M, who is really great in this. Only gets a few scenes. She will go on to do more in later Brosnan films, and of course much more in the Daniel Craig films. But yeah, she's great. She's got the gravitas that you need from a character like M, who's obviously Bond's leader, needs to kind of get him into touch and whatnot. You need someone who can convincingly go toe-to-toe with Bond, in the verbal, in the dialogue kind of section of things, and certainly Judi Dench is definitely the right person for that job. And yeah, changing the sex of M, having a female M instead of a male M, does bring a new dynamic to a character that is a misogynist. I was going to say, as accused of being, he is a misogynist, plain and simple. They write that into the character. They call that out here in this film, and they recognise it as one of Bond's weaknesses, whereas previously maybe not so much. Here they do. They recognise it's a character flaw, but they play with it and they use it. One of the characters they use to kind of bring that out as well is Moneypenny in this. Moneypenny's always been a bit flirtatious with Bond, but you get the sense that she's really in love with him and feels like her day is ruined if she doesn't get to see him. Whereas here we get Samantha Bond playing Moneypenny, and she brings a lot more to the table as well, because you get more of a sense that she's a strong, independent woman who can match Bond with her wit and her sarcasm, and give as good as she gets, so to speak. So I like those new additions. I think Samantha Bond actually is probably my favourite Moneypenny up to this point. She's the one that makes the biggest impression for me. Definitely Judi Dench as M is certainly the strongest M that we've had as well. Now, Bond is referred to this as a Cold War relic, and the film really is doing a lot of work to kind of bring itself up to date. Bring itself up to the times, as it were, back then. I think, if it was released today, maybe people would say it didn't do enough. But certainly back in '95, this was quite a departure from previous Bond movies. There was a lot more attempt being made, I think, to acknowledge Bond's flaws and, some of his lesser qualities as a character. But not make them go away. Use them as part of that character. Izabella Scorupco plays the Bond girl in this, Natasha. So she's an analyst that had worked with Boris and kind of gets caught up in everything. She's a witness to what's gone on. So she teams up with Bond to take on the bad guys. I like her in this. I think she's a good character. I like what she brings from the side of things where she can help Bond with the computer stuff. She has a fragility about her, but also a strength. But what I don't like is the way the love element is handled. So they go through some stuff. Obviously, there's a few action beats and stuff, and then they fly off to some, sunny island somewhere, and then they hop into bed with each other. And there's some dialogue there with her to him where, I don't know, it doesn't feel like they've only known each other for the few days that they have, probably not even a few days, like a day or whatever. It feels like they've had this long-lasting relationship, and I get it, that's part and parcel with Bond, he knows a girl for 5 minutes, they hop into bed with him, boom, we move on to the next thing. But I just feel like with trying to bring it up to date, they could have handled that element a bit better. There's another element of the film that doesn't quite work for me, and that's the amount of model work that goes on. Nearly every action sequence in this, where there's an explosion or whatever, it's all model work, and you can really tell. Back in 95, not so much. I think it worked better in 95, definitely. And I'm still happy that they're using some kind of practical effects. But yeah, today it's dated pretty badly. You can tell it's model work. And it takes some of the oomph out of the action sequences. You know, like we'll get to a couple of films later from this, and this is much improved, I must say, but we'll get there when we get there. Yeah, I just wish we'd have had more big sets that they could just destroy properly rather than model work. That being said, there is still some really good set pieces in here. The tank set piece in particular is phenomenal. So, you know, when Natasha is kind of kidnapped by the general, and Bond basically goes after them in a tank and just destroys half the city. It's very entertaining. It's very practical. You know, they're literally doing this with a tank, and it's so much more effective as a result. You get the adrenaline going because you can see that is a literal tank going over cars, people crawling out of the cars after they've been crushed and stuff. It's just, yeah, for me, it has much more bite to the action when you know that it's real. So like I say, they do go places. You know, they do stuff with the action that, you know, that is good. It's just when it's model work, it kind of takes something out of the sails, takes some wind out of the sails. I do think this film has one of the best fight scenes in a Bond film as well, though there are two cuts. I'm going to touch on this now because it's really annoying. So the fight scene at the end between 007 and 006, really great fight scene. It's, you know, it's very fast, very kinetic, it's brutal. You know, you feel those punches and those kicks. You can tell a lot of choreography's gone into it. It's kind of got a bit of a Bourne feel to it. You know, I know Bourne kind of, the way they do the fights in Bourne kind of inspired how they do them in like Casino Royale, in Daniel Craig's Bond films. But yeah, that element was definitely here as well. You know, we had a bit of it in like films like On Her Majesty's Secret Service as well, the way they were edited together. But certainly the fight scene at the end of this is really great. It's just good to see a main villain going toe-to-toe with Bond for a change, and yeah, being a good match when it's usually the henchman. So yeah, props to the villain, as I say, and all the scenes between him and Bond. Here's the kicker. So I first watched this film back in, it would have been like 97, I reckon. There was usually like a 2-year delay, wasn't there, you know, between cinema and TV release. Came on TV anyway, on ITV, back in 97, and I recorded it off TV and watched it. And I watched that copy quite a few times over the years until eventually I bought it on DVD. And here's the thing. The one that was broadcast on TV, on ITV, has got scenes in there that are not in the DVD. Which I don't get. You know, I understand TV cuts taking things out that were a bit too violent to show in the home. I don't understand TV cuts adding things in that weren't on the cinema release. Or certainly the DVD release. I mean, I don't know if the DVD release was the same as the cinema release or whether they cut something out for it. But yeah, so there's a few... Basically, the fight scene between 006 and 007 at the end, on the TV version I saw, was longer. So it was more brutal. It went on for longer. It had a lot more impact. I still like the fight scene as it is on the DVD version, but knowing that some stuff is missing really annoys me. And the other one is Xenia Onatopp's death scene. So there's a bit in that where she's got Bond And then Natasha comes up and she whacks, or she tries to whack Xenia with this plank of wood. And Xenia catches it, grabs Natasha and headbutts her. And then that's when I think she gives another hit to Bond or whatever, and then he manages to get the helicopter strapped to her. But here there's just, on the DVD version, there's a bizarre cut where, yeah, they cut the headbutt out, and then Bond just... If I hadn't have known it was there, you know, if I hadn't seen that version for so long, it wouldn't bother me. But now, whenever I watch this on DVD, and I don't know if someone can help me out here with regards to what this is all about. I've not seen this film on Blu-ray. I don't know which version is on Blu-ray, but I've been reluctant to buy it because, yeah, as I say, knowing that stuff's there, there's a few other bits as well littered throughout the film, but I just remember getting to that scene after buying it on DVD and was being like, what the hell? They've cut scenes out. They put them in on TV and cut them out for the DVD. So yeah, give me your comments on that one if you have any. One final negative that I do have with this film is the music, the score. Now there are certain sections in it where the music works. There's like a few bits where there's more like a noise that is used, like a clanging noise, which kind of feeds into that Cold War era vibe that you've got going, you know, with the Cossack stuff and all that. However, the majority of the score is it's a bit off. It's very kind of, well, mid-90s. It's kind of synthy, but not in a good way at all. I mean, I'm not that big on synth music anyway, particularly like that 80s stuff. But this is just, it feels like royalty-free music. You know, if you go to certain sites where you can get royalty-free music to use for your projects, it sounds like that. Overall, Goldeneye is a really, really strong start to Pierce Brosnan's tenure as Bond. I think it does kind of revamp the character and, yeah, make you want more, essentially. Now, as I say, I did like License to Kill, but for the most part, people were quite down on it. This definitely revamped Bond, Martin Campbell's first revamp of Bond, it must be said. Yeah, he would come back for Casino Royale. We'll get there when we get there. But yeah, really strong Bond film. One of the better ones, despite the flaws I've mentioned. I enjoy the characters. I like Pierce Brosnan in the role. There's some really good action sequences. You know, the tank sequence and the end fight sequence being the two particular standouts. And I have a lot of fun with the villains in particular. Minus Boris. So I'm going to give Goldeneye a 4 out of 5. But what about you? What do you think of Goldeneye? Where do you think it ranks amongst Pierce Brosnan's Bond films? And yeah, who do you think is the best Bond at this point, I guess, you know, after Goldeneye? So leave your comments below. Let me know your thoughts on this film. Thanks for watching this video, and until next time, cracking.